is a war. It's happening now. It will decide the fate of humanity. The time to choose sides has come. We are the resistance. We are the INFOWAR.
Welcome to the INFOWARS Nightly News. I'm David Knight. It's Monday, September 29th, 2014. Here are top stories.
Tonight, the CFR reveals a plan to neutralize American distemper. Then, tear gas is fired on protesters in Hong Kong. And Louisiana police want residents to fund Big Brother. That's next on the INFOWARS Nightly News.
Everything is awesome. Everything is fantastic when you're part of a team. Everything is wonderful when you're part of the dream.
As Steve Watson points out in his article on INFOWARS.com today, Henry Kissinger is the kingpin of Bilderberg. He's the architect of overthrowing democratically elected governments. Bill O'Reilly was on ABC News this week talking to George Stephanopoulos, and he had this to say about Henry Kissinger.
We don't have any patents today, but I was with Henry Kissinger last night, and he told me that my idea of a worldwide anti-terror force paid for by coalition nations under the supervision of Congress.
So not just the U.S. Bill O'Reilly and Henry Kissinger on a mercenary force.
Simpatico. It's a worldwide war against jihad. Not going to stop. So let's win the war. And that's what George Patton would say. Let's win the damn war.
Did you catch that? He said simpatico. In other words, he and Kissinger are on the same page. I would say he's more like a sycophant. He's someone who's copying what Henry Kissinger has done for years, not giving ideas to Henry Kissinger. It's a very bad idea. I would say it's more like Kingpin Kissinger meets pinhead Bill O'Reilly. The idea of a mercenary global force that is supposedly going to be under the control of Congress, even though it's over many nations, that is nothing but the same type of stuff we've seen rehashed over and over again from the Bilderberg Group, from the CFR, from all these different organizations. And it's just like Bill O'Reilly's rehashing of the book he was promoting, The Killing of Patton. That was just basically respinning and recycling research and interviews that were done by Robert Wilcox in his book published 4 years ago. But now Bill O'Reilly can make a lot of money doing that. It's not a new thing to co-opt ideas from people, and it's not a new thing to co-opt movements from people. This is what Paul Joseph Watson found in Foreign Affairs, that the establishment is desperate to co-opt populist risings. They don't have a secret agenda. They just have an agenda that is ignored, an agenda that is denied. But they were very upfront about it in Foreign Affairs. This is what they had to say. This, of course, is a series of articles in Foreign Affairs magazine, a publication of the Council on Foreign Relations. That's the group that essentially runs our State Department. Some interesting quotes that Paul Joseph Watson pulled out of that. He said that they were going to co-opt and channel popular passions, very concerned about the American distemper, as they called it, addressing political outsiders' legitimate grievances while bypassing their simplistic solutions. In other words, solutions that don't involve larger, more centralized government are simplistic. Now, they go on to say that it now threatens the very existence of the EU. The article says that a decline in living standards from one generation to the next, and the perceived threat to national identity posed by immigration and the growth of supranational organizations. In other words, organizations like the CFR itself, like Bilderberg, and they say that that threatens the very existence of the EU, an organization that was created by these same supranational organizations. Now, they go on to say that the villains in all of this, of course, are the anti-statist populists. Listen to the way they describe this in the CFR's publication. They say these are people who see the state itself as the greatest threat to their liberty and to their lifestyle. Well, how do you turn back those people? Well, they say you have to establish a more democratic government. They wear the mask of democracy. They say we need a more democratic government by increasing wealth redistribution and a more serious attempt to tax wealth. That's their solution. Well, people aren't having any of that in Hong Kong, of course. It's in Hong Kong where the Chinese government has just changed the rules, essentially. It was back in 1997 that Hong Kong came under the sphere of influence of the Chinese, essentially being returned to them from the British at the end of a lease that they had, a 100-year lease. They were promised that they would be a special administrative region. many of the people, I believe, in Hong Kong believe that they're going to have more of an autonomy than they actually are having. Now the Chinese government has imposed new rules that would require that any candidates for office would have to first pledge their allegiance to China and their love for China. They'd have to be essentially vetted by the mainland Chinese communists. That is what these demonstrations are about. They want real candidates. They want the ability to control their own government, essentially. So this is something that has really blown up over the weekend. Pro-democracy protesters wearing masks, wielding umbrellas to protect against pepper spray and tear gas expanded their rallies throughout Hong Kong today on Monday. This is being called the umbrella revolution because people are using umbrellas, plastic wraps, and other things to protect themselves against the tear gas that the police are using against them. But this other article from Paul Joseph Watson, we see that actually the police are now standing back at this point, and they're concerned that it's going to turn into another Tiananmen Square. We can see that in this picture from The Guardian, where you have this one small woman standing up to a group of policemen, just like that one individual stood up to a group of tanks. Now, there was an update today as well in Spain. There, another group is looking for independence, for self-government. That is the Catalonia region. It's in the northern part of Spain, close to the French border. That's an area that for hundreds of years has had its own language, its own culture. It's been subsumed into the Spanish government. They were vigorously persecuted by Franco, the communists who ruled there for a very long time. Now they want a referendum, just like they had in Scotland. The people are overwhelmingly for it. They had a parliament that voted 106 to 28 in favor of doing it. The Spanish prime minister said, nobody and nothing will be allowed to break up Spain. Well, Artur Mas, the countervailing politician in Catalonia, said, what do they have to fear from people expressing their opinions in a ballot? And of course, the position of the Spanish government is there's not going to be any referendum unless the entire population of Spain votes on whether or not this small group can have their independence. That would be essentially the same as the UK government saying that everyone in England as well as Wales would have a vote as to whether or not Scotland could leave, not whether or not Scotland itself would make that decision. So it's denying these very forces. That's what the Council on Foreign Relations is concerned about. That's what the Bilderberg Group is concerned about. That's what Henry Kissinger is concerned about. He doesn't want a globalist force to fight some terrorist boogeyman. He wants it to maintain a centralized globalist world order. Now stay with us right after the break. We're going to have some more information, some breaking whistleblower tapes about the Federal Reserve and their supposed oversight of Goldman Sachs. Stay with us.
In the past decade, we have witnessed unparalleled scientific discoveries in the area of health. But no one has put together a formula that focuses directly on brain health, nerve growth factors, and optimizing your cellular energy at the same time. DNA Force is one of the most expensive formulas to produce. Some of the ingredients in DNA Force are $12,000 a kilogram. We are using the coveted, patented, only American source of PQQ, CoQ10, and more. You want the best that's out there at the lowest price anywhere? Well, we're bringing you a total win-win. The ultimate value, cutting-edge, trailblazing game changer that also supports the InfoWar. We have produced a limited run of DNA Force, and it will take up to 12 weeks to produce more once we sell out. Secure your DNA Force today at InfoWarsLife.com or call toll-free 888-253-3139. DNA Force from InfoWars Life.
Celebrate the spirit of freedom and liberty upon which our nation was founded at InfoWarsShop.com. Molon Lave is ancient Greek for come and take it. This popular design combines both classic Greek Spartan imagery with modern M16 assault rifles. Now available in women's tees and proudly made in the USA. Celebrate the spirit of 1776 with the George Washington brass belt buckle or this incredibly sharp-looking 1776 hat. Badass. And be sure to check out the new arrivals at InfoWars Life, where you can prepare your body to perform at peak levels with Survival Shield Nascent Iodine, Super Male Vitality, and Fluoride Shield. And wake up, America. Immune Support Blend is the healthy choice for the gourmet coffee lover. So get incredibly high-quality, freedom-based products and help fund the revolution at InfoWarsShop.com. Good evening, everyone. I'm Darren McBreen, and here are some of today's top stories that are breaking right now at INFOWARS.com. The threat posed by grassroots movements like the Tea Party represents a major challenge to the existing world order, and it must be hijacked and misdirected in order to have its potency diffused. This, according to a series of articles in this month's Foreign Affairs magazine, published by the CFR. In a speech to the United Nations General Assembly, Syria's foreign minister accused Barack Obama of arming ISIS terrorists. The Obama administration and its coalition partners are fueling terrorism by arming and funding al-Qaeda militants, and the practice needs to stop, Syrian Foreign Minister Walid al-Muallim said today. Police in Louisiana are urging residents to add surveillance cameras to their homes and then hand over control of the cameras to law enforcement, an effort they claim will make neighborhoods safer. For more information, plus updates and breaking news, go to INFOWARS.com.
Yesterday, some secret tapes from a whistleblower were brought public by ProPublica and NPR's This American Life. Now, the person in question, Carmen Segarra, was part of an operation that began after 2008 financial crisis, where they were trying to put some window dressing of reform with the Federal Reserve, with banks, with oversight. She was investigating Goldman Sachs, seeing if they had any policy and what their policy was on conflict of interest. Were they enforcing that policy? She claims that they didn't even have a policy. And where it gets interesting is how the Federal Reserve itself tried to cover up her investigation. Now, in this article from ProPublica, they point out that one New York Fed employee, a supervisor, described his experience in trying to look at the relationship between the Federal Reserve and these banks they were overseeing, as well as Goldman Sachs. He described it as regulatory capture. They said that's a phrase commonly used to describe a situation where banks co-opt regulators. He said, he included in the footnote, within 3 weeks on the job, I saw the capture set in. That's a quote from a manager. They tried to get that quote taken out, but that was left in the report. Of course, nobody really read that report. People are now starting to pay attention simply because of these tapes, of the back and forth between this whistleblower. Now, when you look at this, one of the things that strikes me is that the Federal Reserve was supposedly regulating Goldman Sachs. Talk about the fox guarding the hen house. That's about as absurd as it gets. Of course, they have a relationship where they have helped Goldman Sachs as well as all of the major banks eliminate their competition, as well as defraud the public, defraud mortgage investors, defraud the people who bought their fraudulent mortgage instruments, their securities that they created without having any real security behind them. In a Wall Street Journal article today, they point out that the Fed rate policies are actually aiding the foreign banks. What a surprise that is as well. They say banks headquartered outside the United States have been unlikely beneficiaries of the Federal Reserve's interest rate policies. They're likely, they say, to keep profiting as the Fed changes the way it controls borrowing costs. They say that foreign firms have received nearly half of both the $4.7 billion in interest the Fed banks paid so far this year. Nearly half of the $5 billion worth of interest. And of course, it's a game that they're playing where they essentially can put their deposits on loan with the Fed and get interest. They can borrow this money out at 0% and loan it back. They say it's a source of virtually risk-free investing. And so what are the banks that are benefiting from this? Well, according to the article, it's banks like Deutsche Bank, UBS as a Swiss bank, Bank of China, Bank of Tokyo, and then, of course, the usual suspects in America, JP Morgan, Wells Fargo, Bank of America. This is what a former economist for the Federal Reserve said, a very telling quote. He said, it's a small transfer from U.S. taxpayers to foreign taxpayers. No, first of all, it's not small. Secondly, it's not going to foreign taxpayers, it's going to foreign banks. Deutsche Bank, UBS, Bank of China, it's not going to foreign taxpayers. And he goes on to say that the transfer was a side effect of Fed policy, not a goal. No, the goal of the Federal Reserve has always been a transfer of wealth from taxpayers to the banks, and it's continuing with that same program.